All right. Looks like we are
live.
good to go. Got some crowd applauding. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, everybody. Hey, welcome to the weekly Jargon. I'm Abel.
Jose.
Rohi.
No last names today. You like how I did that? I like how you followed suit. Good job, guys. Well, hey, today's event is sponsored by. No, I'm just kidding. Jose, actually.
You know, this is from our local donut basket. And if you live in Madera and you haven't visited them, I mean, this is an alternative to Starbucks, but also, you know, you have great donuts there. So if you haven't visited the donut basket, this is off of. What'd you say? Is it
off of Howard?
The elbow
Pine,
of
so right next
to Johnny Quick.
There you go. And get out there, visit them, support your local businesses. Great donuts and good coffee. Yeah. So yeah, there you go. If you're listening to us from Donut Basket, you know, hey, we're taking any type of advertisement.
Yeah. I would say the bad thing is they don't have a drive-through, but the good thing is they don't have a drive-through. Mm-hmm. So it kind of forces you to get down and usually kind of see somebody you either know or you know get a good conversation while you're waiting in line. So it gives you that old coffee house feel. Pretty cool.
And you know, right across the street you also have the other little
Cup of Joy,
and that's a drive-through, and I see that pretty busy throughout the mornings, right? It seems like a pretty busy stop for many people that don't want to get off. You know, you have coffee. You know, if we really want to talk about coffee, it looks like America's drug, right? I mean, it seems like everybody needs their cup of joy in the morning, right? And if you're listening, cup of joy, I mean, hey.
Yeah, no, I think it's certainly a habit. But what's in it? You know, they load that stuff up with sugar, which I think is really America's drug. And so yeah, we gravitate to that. But if you're going to Cup of Joy, I always get it half sweet, and the coffee's still so good that, you know, even at half sweet, it still packs a punch as far as flavor goes. So, little hack for you guys.
What do you think, Roy?
I go to both. You know, we get the sandwiches at Donut Basket. That's kind of my go-to there. I'm not a big donut guy.
Sorry, I could see that.
Yeah. So sorry to pass on those, but
if you're passing on donuts, you can have a nice physique like Rohi.
Yeah.
So
but definitely, a couple of joys are secondary for if you want a little bit stiffer coffee. So
yeah.
Well, you know, and just talking about coffee in general, you know, I've acquired a taste to have it just black, right? Mm-hmm. And there was a time where what I really enjoyed adding honey to my coffee just to have that sweetness, right? But I noticed that with coffee, especially these flavored drinks now that have coffee in it, you know, they're loaded with sugar. Mm-hmm. And you talked about it earlier, right? But if you order a latte or you order, I mean, it's always with a certain pump of some syrup or something to make it very sweet. And if you order a mocha or what have you at any of these places, you know, you're expected to have it loaded with sugar. Yeah. And it just becomes an acquired taste. You like your coffee sweetened. So if you try the black coffee, though, it'll certainly not be something that's very pleasurable and bitter. But when you acquire the taste, and it doesn't really matter.
That was my one, I guess, disappointment with the other franchise that's in town. That we don't have to mention in case they want to sponsor us too. But I remember going to them the first time because everybody was hopped up over their coffee, and I said, okay, well, what kind of coffee do you have? Yeah. Because, you know, there's like French roast. Because it's a coffee shop. Like, what are you talking about? Well, like, do you have like French roast? No, but we put like stuff in it.
Yeah.
Said, okay, thanks.
Well, I think I know who you're talking about, and they're definitely not catering to our demographic.
No, they're not a coffee place.
Our age, we're far too old for their target market there. Yeah. But everything's a lot cooler.
We get the teas, but not the coffee.
That's,
you know, so.
Yeah, no, that's no, but you know, a good cup of coffee, and it's funny because when we go on our diet kicks at home. My wife will say, I'm gonna go black with the coffee, but she hates black coffee, and so do I. Well, no, I can drink it sometimes if the coffee's good. Actually, this coffee was really good, so I put a little sugar in it. And but my wife will start trying to cut creamer out, and she doesn't put a whole lot, maybe like 2 tablespoons or whatever it might be. And so I'm like, okay, you're on a diet, and you're trying to watch yourself. Do you really think the 35 calories in your, to start your day is going to make that big of an impact?
Yeah.
Or should you start your day the way you want to, enjoy the 35 calories and start off right, and then make bigger sacrifices down the road, right? So, so I don't know. And then as you were talking about that, right? It's like, man, reduce sugar. I remember as a kid, you'd spend the night at your grandparents' house, or I would spend the night at my grandparents' house. They had a huge orange tree. And they say, oh, go, every morning, go grab, oranges, and we'd freshly squeeze orange juice. Well, guess what's in those oranges? A whole lot of sugar, right? So it's almost like a catch-20. Just because it's a fruit doesn't always mean it's healthier or a healthier alternative. Of course, there's vitamins and things like that, but I think that's kind of where the majority of us are in America, right? It's like, what the hell do we eat? Because everything gets you sick, apparently.
Well, and that was the fun, before Thanksgiving or the day of Thanksgiving, I Googled how many calories are in your average Thanksgiving meal. and Google said it was somewhere between 2,000 and 6,000
Oh my
calories.
God.
So we were definitely taken back a little bit. I still ate. I still probably ate my closer share of 6,000 calories. But yeah, it's tough when you look at it to say, I want to be healthy, especially it's end of the year, Planet Fitness is going to probably sponsor New Year's Eve again. And you get that I want a new body for 25.
New year,
kick.
new me.
Yeah.
Right?
And you like you said, you start remembering like that little cup of, sugar is there, a little scoop of sugar is not doing anything for you.
Well, and that's an interesting topic. I know that our conversations are typically local updates, right? But hey, we started off with the
That's
coffee.
local. Yeah.
But it's true. I mean, you talked about the freshly squeezed orange juice. The difference between that sugar or that fructose, sucrose, whatever you want to call it, is that it's not processed, and your body can digest it. It has certain properties that are very nutritional for your body, whereas refined sugars or corn syrups that are made from high fructose corn, right? Those, your body remember, these are these were refined as of maybe 30, 50 years ago, when this became such a popular way of doing it. Well, the human body has been able to digest properly, store certain sweets with fruits or carbs that are natural, for millions or thousands and thousands of years. So when you introduce something like high fructose corn syrup or refined sugars, then your body has a hard time of really like, how do I process that? How do I stop it from kicking out insulin to try to get me to neutralize the sugar in my body? And after a certain time period, you started seeing our diet started changing. After the 1970s, you started seeing a lot more cases where you saw Americans have poor diets that eventually lead up to obesity to diabetes. And we face that here in our county as well. Again, we've talked about this before, but I'm not, and by no way or means am I in the best health ever, because I still consume sweets. I still consume some of those some donuts, and they may have.
As he wipes the crumbs off his chin.
They may have those processed refined sugars, but in moderation, right? That's the thing. It's not a daily deal. I treat us here. The last time I think we had donuts was probably about a month or 2 months ago. But
it's been a while.
No,
just think about it. If it's a daily deal,
no, we talked about last week. We were talking about the economy, right? And the nature of the tariffs and how that'll impact us. And now as we were facing this new administration with RFKJ, at the helm of food and nutrition, a lot of people are saying, good, we need to get all these processed foods out of here. We need to eliminate all this junk out of our food. But what issues is that going to cause financially at the supermarket, right? If we're eliminating these preservatives in our foods, now they have a lower shelf life, and now that's going to increase the cost for manufacturing costs because you're having to make it more frequently. You got more product going bad. Does that jack up our grocery bill even further? And last week I also said, it's growing pains, right? We all want what's good for us, but sometimes what's good for us isn't feasible in this exact moment, right? You guys have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, so I'm actually reading a book I got for my birthday about mini farms, and it's a good book because it's teaching people about again, self-sufficiency. And I think that's what's been lost. You know, people are too reliant on somebody else. And it has to do with time. I mean, time is it's precious. And I think people think too much of what it takes to grow a fruit tree. I put some fertilizer and I give it water and then I go pick the fruit. It's not too crazy, you know.
Yeah.
But when you start thinking like, you know, fruits and vegetables and having to work the ground and plant the seed and, you know, it can seem like it's overwhelming, but you know, one of the things it talks about is how easy it is for even a modest backyard, because obviously backyards are shrinking, that you can either reduce or completely cut out, you know, a lot of that food bill, minus, like they said, minus meat, because I mean, most people aren't going to raise a cow or a pig in their backyard, but I mean, to some degree, be able to have fresh produce of some kind that has, like, you know, with me, I push all organic. We don't do any pesticides. I don't do anything, you know, and it just tastes better. But it's not something for everybody. But it's how you combat it. Because, I mean, I go to the store right now, and if I want to get a tomato, you know, I can't complain to the fact that tomato doesn't look that great because it's not tomato season.
Right.
It was probably picked 6 months ago, and it's been sitting in cold storage, and now it's at the end of its shelf life, and they're pushing out the door. You know, so you do have to kind of give up some of that convenience people have given up, in the sense of, like, right now I want a bell pepper. It's not bell pepper season, but I guarantee I could find one on the shelf.
Right.
It's just super processed and
That's
full
a
of
good,
pesticides.
That's a good point, because when you go
you know,
to a really good restaurant, they'll say, "Oh, that's not in season."
Yeah.
You know, oh, we don't. You know, that salad's not in season, so we don't have the we have a different salad, right?
Yeah.
And you're like, "What happened to my salad?" You know, and it's like, "No, we have a different one, right?"
Yeah, this is spinach and lettuce season.
because
you
it's
know?
fresh,
So,
right?
Yeah.
They care about the freshness of it.
And even the price. I mean, we talk about the economy, right? But even the price for fruit that's not in season is quite out there. You know, last week my wife went out a local store here, and she said I grabbed some grapes, and to the self checkout she had to weigh it, and it was like over $12-13 for a small amount of grapes.
Yeah.
And I think she said, wow, I mean, I didn't think that this was this expensive. And, you know, depending on where they're coming from, right? I mean, obviously a lot of the grapes, we get a lot of grapes from south of the border. We get grapes from different, I mean, these are probably your freshest grapes you're going to get, unless they're coming from overseas. But, I mean, you would only think, well, where have they been? How long? You know, but I mean, I'm sure that with refrigeration, you keep a lot of this fruit intact. But it's trying to consume those good fruits, those good veggies that we all need. But like you said, it's the convenience of, do I grow it myself, or is it easier for me to go to the store and buy me a pound or 2 pounds of apples or tomatoes or what have you? And a lot of the times, you know, it's sad because in order for people in America, especially in certain sectors of America, that fruit's not available. So it's provided in cans, processed, you know, in some way. Well, this is where you get the fruits from, right? And I mean, that's how people get around to it. And unfortunately, it's how much your dollar can extend, right?
Yeah.
My dollar can extend to buy me these groceries that are high in sodium, high in fat, and high in sugar. And those are the cheapest things because we produce those in abundance. And we put that just about in everything. You name a food that doesn't have salt or sugar, and man, it's really rare. You have to practically eat it raw.
But you said it right. The people don't realize that we make a lot of good produce here, but you don't see it on the shelf for one reason. Other countries are willing to pay more. You know, we did security for there's a orchard just not too far from here, and you know, when we asked them, like, oh, I've never seen these on the shelves, because you won't pay the price that they can get. They said in Japan. Japan pays a super premium for this certain product, and it was kind of mind blowing to think, like, you're in my backyard, like you could pop a stand up and I could go buy it. And they said no. For what we can get for it, it's way more than the American people are willing to pay. Right. And I think that's really the other side of it is, you know, when you start talking about the global market, you start realizing that your farmers that we're supporting here, they're getting more money if they ship it overseas, you know? So that's why you don't necessarily see in your market, like, you know, a lot of the produce that's coming literally from, I mean, around us. We're surrounded by farming, but it doesn't hit my market because it's being sold elsewhere because it's to the top dollar.
They used to at one point call the valley the country's like fruit basket, right? Like we were considered something like that. It was a term. It was like we were the or maybe even the world's like fruit basket or something, where because we are producing so much here. But interesting how you're saying, you can do so much with, your backyard. And I don't think we have that culture. I think, most of the time it does come down to timing. And so that's usually why older people tend to garden more, right? Because they have that time. They're not running around with their kids and, running around trying to, establish themselves in their career. And I was feeling guilty as you're saying that, because like, I'm literally like, I'm probably not going to have an ounce of grass in my backyard within a couple weeks. I'm putting cement, but because it's like, what do I need grass for? It dies and you have to keep it up and all this kind of stuff. I want to just, I would just want to be able to go out there and enjoy it. But certainly, shame on me, because I'm not thinking, well, I could farm on that dirt, and I could make some zucchinis and, tomatoes and jalapenos.
Yeah. I think what's happening, Abel, is that there's no need right now. You don't have that necessity right now, because we're not in these times where, you're practically going through famine. We have food in abundance. And I think through our generations, in the past two, 3 generations, with the exception of people that lived through the Depression, really haven't gone through that. After World War II, we had a boost in the economy where we started manufacturing a lot of different types of products. And that created, a sense of, well, now I have a steady job. I can go buy this stuff from the farmers. I don't have to grow it anymore. But prior to that, if you go back to a period prior to the 1930s, I mean, even unless you were in really urban areas, you had a lot of rural farming and people that sustained their family with these farms. Well, that's kind of changed a little bit. You do have some farming here, but again, these farms are not necessarily to supply all of your locals. Some of them are competing in the global market as well. I mean, we ship out a lot of almond, like you said. The almond requires a certain type of climate to grow, and I think California is about one of the only states in the because it has certain seasons where the almond trees go into a dormant stage, right? And this happens with the pistachios as well. But man, we are a producer of almonds, and if you look around the Central Valley, that's pretty much all you see. So I don't think we're consuming all the almonds here. I'm sure we're making flour out of it. We're products, milk, everything that, some of it is for us here locally, but at the same time, it's being exported. It's no longer to support the family that's running that farm, meaning I'm producing enough almonds for me to store for the winter. It's producing almonds to make a profit.
Yeah, and the other thing too, I mean, when we talk about local, we've said it before, but it's a difference of, almost like living paycheck to paycheck. Is most people, if you had an incident, whatever major earthquake tomorrow, you probably have maybe a couple days worth of food. Where back east, now that they're getting 6 feet of snow, they're used to being piled in and packed up and having canned food and preparations, and I think that's the other side of why a lot of people also don't farm, is because it's the want it now mentality. Is like, well, I feel like having this right now, and therefore I'm just going to go find the place that has it, not being mindful of like, well, it's not the best looking one, or this has been picked way too soon, and it's not even a ripened fruit or vegetable.
You mean the term stocking up for the winter actually means something somewhere, right? We certainly don't do that here. Unless pandemic people were stocking up on toilet paper and water and stuff. But no,
Trump's elected, so another pandemic could be around the corner. I mean,
I think especially here in California, it's like we're pretty spoiled with, or in the valley at least, with we don't have the snowy roads, and aside from some morning fog, you wait it out a couple hours. And you can get to where you need to be. The stores are going to be stocked, and you have that convenience. But emergency happens, sheesh, man. What happens? We're going to be scrounging.
But I mean, just to say that, we used to have the small pop-up farm, that was down there on Tozier, where you could go buy directly from them. But that's you don't have that in as much farming as we have around us. You don't really, you don't see that. So it just shows you how much of a disconnect there is from that farming to the table of, mass-produced farm. Yeah. There's no more of like that mom and pop feel of like, I'm gonna, like you go to Gilroy,
fruit stands.
You drive that 152. There's a fruit stand 3-4 on a block of these people selling their produce. You just don't really have that in this community, even though there's so much farming.
Yeah,
around
I
us.
mean, if you walk into a Walmart, for example, you'll see produce there. I don't know where that produce comes from. I'm not sure if it's local, but if every Walmart's stocking up on produce now, I mean, you would think that their prices are more competitive when it comes to like a Save Mart and what have you. But I think the process of having the fruit harvested, and then you have to go through a middle person that has to pay a lot of overhead, and sometimes there may be, wages are involved. So at what price do I have to sell these bananas to be able to keep afloat and still generate the profitability margin that I need to keep this company going, right? And I think maybe like in Walmart, they secure these huge orders in bulk to make it a lot easier and cheaper for people, but they probably get it from one or two or local, who knows, farmers to try to get all that squared away, right? With bananas, I don't think we grow bananas here locally, so they're coming from somewhere.
You figure, but then the retailer is saying, who's banana? I can buy bananas in, I don't know where they make bananas, but I can buy bananas in this region from Jose, or I could buy it from this region and this farm from Rohi. But man, Rohi's bananas, they last a week. They have a week longer shelf life, So let's buy those, right? Because I'm not going to ask what's in those bananas, but let's buy those because we have more opportunity to sell them.
Yeah.
Right. And then that's where, obviously the way we started this conversation with preservatives and the things that are being added to increase shelf life, it comes down to those financial decisions, right? The financial benefit of those preservatives. And not only do they make things, an easier sell for the farmer, but then, you have the retailer who's willing to purchase more, who then could be competitive in pricing so that the consumer shops at their store versus other stores. So,
and here's the comparison that I see between like a Walmart and a Save Mart when it comes to their produce, right? So, if you walk into the Walmart's produce section, it's like an island, just an island that's not manned by anyone specifically. They're in boxes, and whatever's there is there. People jump by them and get them. Whereas you go to a Save Mart, that produce is being turned around, sprayed with water. You're always constantly moving stuff around. You're making sure that everything looks ripe, waxy if they're apples, so that, it attracts people. Hey, that apple there looks very, very good. You may see the price and say, oh, shit. But again, that's the cost of having someone man it for you and also trying to bring that quality that people want to see. They're willing to pay that extra $1.50 a pound more to be able to see that turning around, the watering, the spraying, so that it can last longer, right? They try to preserve it a lot more because they're in certain temperatures, right? If you go through the Save Mart, you'll see these refrigerators that are there, spraying water constantly, turning the fruit around, making sure that nothing goes bad. But at some point, not all that fruit is sold, so they have to do something with that fruit. Who knows what happens to that fruit, right?
Food bank.
Yeah, I'm assuming that's how they collect that, right? And then. But I mean, that's kind of what you see in the quality, but you also see that in the price. So are you willing to go through the rush at Walmart and get through all those people to grab some bananas? Or do you want to go where you feel like, well, I know that out here, at least they turn them around.
But that's the leap from like you have like the Whole Foods idea is that you're focused on the preservative and the not so great, but then you make the jump to that Whole Foods market, and it's people who are willing to pay even more for the same product, for the same tomato, but it's organic, or it just is supposed to look better. It gets to that point of you say, well, that organic just means I could do it myself. I mean, that's what I hear when I hear people say the word organic fruit. It's like, that just means you just grow it yourself and you just don't put anything in it, because if it doesn't have any of that stuff and it was picked correctly, then it can't be. It's got to be somewhat fresh. It may mean it has to come from a certain region to be getting it this time of the year, but organic to me means it should have been picked fresh. Nothing was done to it. Okay, well that's the same thing I can do in my backyard.
So I'm going to jump a little within the same line of conversation there. I'm going to jump into a different question. We hear a lot of this hype now. I mean, obviously our fruits, they come from different places. Some here in the Central Valley, we grow. We would be the largest, one of the fifth largest economy in the world. A lot of it is ag based, right? But if these tariffs, I mean, we're talking about tariffs now. There's tariffs that are being imposed with Canada, China, Mexico, and we hear that all over the news. I mean, we're not economists, but we listen to economists, and you get two different sides, right? Well, I mean, it's good for the country. It's not good for the country. I mean, is it good for the consumer though? And that's a question that I wanted to pose to you, based on some information that I've heard. Again, my opinion. Is that it may potentially affect the consumer. The end user of that product may have an increase, or I mean, nobody likes to call it a tax, but essentially it's a tax on the consumer, because it's not the person that's importing the deal that's getting taxed, it's the person buying it from the importer, absorbing that, therefore creating a higher price and possibly less demand. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I think in hindsight it would. I think we brought up a good topic, or a good point last week, where we said that's where China manufacturing finds a way to manufacture somewhere else. And because you got to maintain profit margins no matter what company you are. It's always about maintaining those profit margins. And if you have a $1 million or $1 billion industry making a certain product out of China, and we're basically saying we're going to shut that down, cut your profits in half because of these tariffs, they're not going to say, well, we're going to keep making it and hope you guys are willing to pay more and keep selling it, right? They're going to say, okay, we're going to sell this company to India. And we're going to let India know, hey, look how much profits right here. Like, buy this off of us. And somebody in India is going to say, absolutely, because I don't have these tariffs on me. So absolutely, I'll take it. I'll buy it. And now I'll produce it, and business kind of goes on. Now there might be, there might be a time delay, or a time where that product goes, obsolete. But I can guarantee you those conversations are already happening now, and the amount of profits being made off of a lot of these products and manufacturing, they're not going to go unnoticed, and they're definitely not going to go away. Somebody's going to pick up that slack. Right, and those ideas, those concepts, that whole what's in place, I think will just be sold somewhere else, out of somewhere else.
I would agree. I mean, I think that, again, coming from the gun industry, we see it all the time. Like, the U.S. has all these sanctions against, like, Russian imports, for instance, and those ammo manufacturers just made the move to put that manufacturing plant outside of the tariff location, rebranded as a different name, because they know that they're just like, you're not just going to go, I guess we're going to lose all those sales.
Right,
it's business,
Right.
And then when you look at it and you say, well, what about the consumer paying the tax? I mean, that was the fear with the 11% tax on guns and ammo, that is going to crumble the economy, and that the guns were going to stop. People will sure buy. They can, again, like we've talked about, they can only buy less. They can't buy as much ammo as they may have wanted to, or another gun like they may have wanted to, because of the 11%. But they're still going to spend that same amount of money they intend to spend. If it was $100 every week buying ammo, they're going to spend the $100. It just means they get one less box or whatever, at the end of the day. So it's always just political. It's just, it's smoke and mirrors to say, hey, I'm going to say all these words, and it makes headlines about tariffs. But at the end of the day, I don't know that the average consumer is going to maybe feel it necessarily. Maybe at first, like you said, just because there's that lag in manufacturing, or shifting of plants, or building of plants. But you're just going to see a new company pop up, and you're going to go, hey, that really looks like this other company has to get from Mexico. It is the same. It's,
So do you feel that, tariffs in a way are to protect American industries? I mean, because, or
it doesn't protect anything. I think it's just for words on a newspaper.
But I mean, look at it this way. I mean, if I am advocating for, hey, impose tariffs because they're out competing me, they're selling their product for a lot less cheap than what I can do here. If I am a manufacturer of some sort, and that import that's coming in is a lot cheaper, I'm having to lay off people because I can't compete with them anymore. I have to pay these high wages, especially here in California. Yep. Therefore, I think that by adding those tariffs, it slows down the supply chain, and therefore I can keep competitive. And what's interesting, I saw this not an economist, but they did a report on, like, in the 1940s or 50s, where we were exporting a lot of chicken to the UK. and that was they were eating a lot of chickens. We were one of their biggest exporters. We're one of the biggest exporters of chickens, and that at that moment, I forget what president put put a tariff on there as well, like a 25% tariff. So in retaliation to that, they put a tariff on all of their like their cars. So that's why the Mercedes, BMWs, they have these high import tariffs, right? You're going to pay a higher price, a higher premium for them. But anyhow, after a while, you notice that the jobs, obviously here in the States, they were concentrated to certain specialized interest companies, and that shrank the amount of jobs. So it didn't create more jobs, it actually shrank the jobs. And here we're promoting that we're going to create more jobs. So I'm interested to see how that happens when history has shown us in the past that it hasn't happened.
Yeah.
So, I mean, maybe to some extent it does, like you said, maybe it's something you want to put out there. It's going to protect our jobs. It's going to do this. It's going to do that. But I'd like to see how those numbers.
Well, I think to Rohi's point, it does look better on a newspaper or a headline, right? And when you're running an election, you're trying to draw a distinction. You're trying to show strength. You're trying to show Trump was differentiating himself from the current administration by saying, I'm willing to stand up to countries like China, right? And I think the average Joe here in America, feels threatened by China. We hear about their economy and, the things that they're able to do, and we fear that. And so by saying, here's a man who's willing to stand up for the United States and willing to impose this, tariff or these sanctions on this big, massive country, I think that shows that Trump knew what he was playing into right there. Now, let's get back to reality, right? We've always said this country's ran by the top 1%, right? These are your business owners. These are your people who are relying on these supply chains. And Trump's always been, credited or discredited for his allegiance to large corporations, right? Oh, he's all about the corporations and not about the small time folks. Well, do you really think that somebody who's has that type of association or that type of mindset is going to affect the local profits of these, top 1% or these, million and billionaires? It would affect them as well, right? So it sounds good, the smoke and mirrors, it sounds tough, but in reality, is it something that can happen? Probably not. But is it conversation? Did it take up, shoot, man, we charge $10,000 a minute on this show, right? For any type of airtime. And they got about 10 minutes of our time, right? So, no, I'm just kidding. But, but you have people come, talking about it now because it's, oh, well, this and that. And, naturally the Democratic Party the Democratic Party is going to try to attack that and say, that's stupid. Why we're going to harm ourselves and this and that, but I think at the end of the day, I don't think that needle's going to move as far as we're boasting about during election time.
So here's another question to that, because you brought up a good point, is do you believe that the majority of Americans understand how these foreign trade wars work? I mean, do you think your average Joe that, like, us, for example, that are out there voting on emotion, are we voting with understanding what the consequences of something like this are? I mean, or are we so far disenfranchised that we feel that, hey, this is going to be our savior? I mean, but it seems like every cycle of a presidency, there's a savior. Obama was a savior. The promise to change, right? Bush Sr., no more taxes. Reagan, we're going to do this. I mean, you go back to history and it seems like, well, I mean, it's just like it's cyclical.
Yeah.
Well, that's what wins you the seat. It's creating urgency.
Who wins? Do the American people win? Because the notion that let's make America great again. Well, when was it great for who? I mean, and that's the thing that I find hard to like make America great again. And I mean, I'm not denouncing the actual make America great again. I mean, shit, it'd be great. It'd be great to make America great. But again, how? When? Are we in a decline? Are we starting to see the decline of America? And does it take a push like this to get us back on top? Or is it just another false illusion to give our hopes up like we have been? I mean, if you go back to the 1970s and you look at the cost of living added with inflation, I mean, it seems like we're not progressing. So it doesn't matter how many presidents have been there since the 1970s. We really haven't seen a lot of progress. I mean, as far as wages go, in comparison to the cost of living, if anything, it seems like inflation, cost of living goes up, and wages are just stagnant and gradually going up, but it's not to a point where it's a good standard of living. Now you have to have two people, having to keep a household, three people, sometimes multi-families coming together to preserve that one home, especially here in California. We talk about it, the average home now is about $450,000 or more.
Yeah. Well, I would say that, you said a key word for me. It was hope, right? Like, are we just being hopeful? Does Make America Great Again, does it create hope? And man, this is a country that I would argue has always been fascinated with hope, right? From our religion to the holidays that we celebrate, right? Whether you're Christian and you celebrate Christmas, or you are just simply American and you celebrate Santa Claus during Christmas, right? It's always this hope that something great's going to happen, right? That something good is coming. And it's through that hope that keeps us, that American dream alive. You come to this country and you're like, I hope I could make it. It's hard work, perseverance. And so, yeah, that's one of the greatest campaign, tactics. And that's why we see this urgency, this fear. You gotta, in order to have hope, you have to fear that something's wrong, right? And so, those are those distinctions during campaigns. It's like, this is an issue. Oh my God, we're all going to die. But I have the solution. I'm going to take us back here, right? And then Make America Great Again. It's like, yeah, who was it ever great for? Well, it's great it used to be great for the majority of the voters who are today, right? Your baby boomers, who are the largest population. And then you have your Gen Xers who, by the way, both would argue, oh, we're the greatest generation and we understand, we lived through all these times, right? Those are the people that are voting. The millennials are now arguably the next largest generation of people. I think they've outnumbered the boomers statistically. But these millennials now, who are your core voters, ages, I think it's like 32 to like 42, right? These are your core voters. Or 45, something like that. These guys have just, all they've heard growing up is how great things used to be. How great it was in the 50s with your T-Birds and your, pink ladies and, the whole greaser stuff. And, America was awesome. And you can, go to the diner and, everybody knew everybody. And so we've been chasing that hope of like, man, I'd like to experience what Grandma and Grandpa did. I'd like to experience what Mom and Dad did. And things were safer. And there's this whole perception, right? And that's what we've been hearing. And I think those are the heartstrings that are being tugged on when we say, Make America Great Again. Let's go back to simpler times, back when you could farm your own mill, when you had your piece of land, and you could start up a business and and make it into $1 million industry. Now the reality is that all possible? I don't know. To your point, we're in a different age now, but your people have to have that hope. That's important. We can't all Americans just sit here and throw up our hands and say, it's useless. I'm not going to try anymore. We have to have that hope.
So my understanding is, I get the hope. I guess hope has never been a strategy, right? Because it's hope. It doesn't guarantee you nothing, and it's the only thing we have, I guess. Like,
but it's what we hold on to.
It's what we hold on to. You're absolutely right. But I think the period that we're talking about, like you said, you brought up a good point, is the boomers. During those times in the 50s and 60s, we just had gotten out of a war, so people are back. We're manufacturing. A lot of manufacturing jobs here in America. People want to drive. People want to buy homes. So you have this supply chain of products and materials that are needed to be able to supply the American people, especially the biggest birth rate demographic that existed in America. Now you're having the McDonald's comes into play, the Gerbers come into play, diapers comes into play, the ovens, the washers. So everything's being manufactured in America. car dealers, for example. You look at Detroit, you look at Compton, you look at Watts. I mean, you started seeing from Latinos to Black Americans prosper within that period of time because it was a good time to have a good job. People moving from the East to the West Coast to trying to get these better jobs. And then all of a sudden, I mean, like any company or any corporation, your responsibility is to your shareholders. You have to provide dividends every year in order for your stock to have some value. Well, what is your biggest cost? A lot of it is labor. So then why don't I just shut my company here and I export it out? Why don't I do this? And that's what you're starting to see because it's a corporate mentality is always to, and this isn't nothing against corporations because that's the nature of that corporation is to try to expand itself to create so many shareholders so that it has a lot of money to create bigger growth, right? But essentially, does it reach a certain level of where it no longer can produce anymore? And the only way it can is to cut from the bottom, right? Either cut at the top or cut at the bottom, or you narrow your margins, or you're slimming the product, like the Doritos we're talking about, right? You don't add that many chips anymore, or you don't add that much ounces anymore in certain things. But essentially, you have to do something, and the majority of the time, it just happens to be that it's the wages are the ones that are not there. So then they close plants, and when they close plants, guess what?
Yeah,
People suffer.
But you're missing the thing that you're missing out of that is, especially when people say they want manufacturing. There's different types of manufacturing. You don't want the dirty manufacturing, which is what China does a lot for us. Like when they make those little toys and tinkle, all that chemical stuff, you don't want that here. It's a mess over there. You want to keep that there. The other thing that they're doing that's different is the majority of those plants is one guy and 100 robots. You're not going to have that here. If you did, you would definitely be able to compete with China. But what does California do? California as a whole says, well, every time you replace a human with a robot, you have to pay the same fee. So they're not really trying to look out and compete in a global scale. The thing is that I think you have to look at it and you have to say, when people want more wages, you said it right. They wanted. And after World War II, they wanted the house, they wanted the car. They had this desire to go out, work as hard as they could to better themselves. There's no more of that. It's, I want a new TV. All right, it's a couple $100. And once I get it, I get it. Or now, if I can't get it, I'll just steal it, But if you're trying to say, like, people need to better themselves, what do? Cut the jobs that are paying minimum wage. Go replace McDonald's and all these fast food places with a robot. Have that one or two guy that's getting paid $30 an hour to maintain the robot, right? You say, yeah, we lost jobs. Well, guess what? That's going to force you into the better jobs that if you look at the job market, they can't even find people. There's all these jobs that are paying good money that they can't find applicants for. So the jobs are there. But what people have done is go, well, yeah, but that requires work, and I don't want to work. I want 3 days off, and I want my weekends, and I don't want to do anything, and I don't even want a house anymore. I'm going to live with my parents. All I want is my nice car, and my TV, my Xbox, and I'm good.
Yeah, and I appreciate what you said because if we go back in the history, we even look at the coal mining. You said those dirty jobs. They're not dirty jobs. They're hardworking jobs for certain people. But even like in the Appalachians, for example, if you go back in the history, you'll see the wars that took place between the union workers, the people that were, in the coal mines. Well, in that area, a lot of poverty exists now because they pulled that out. That industry, Michigan, the steel, pulled that out. Manufacturers of vehicles pulled that out. Those areas are the ones that are devastated because it was at that moment when you can guarantee these steel mill jobs, these coal jobs, these car manufacturer jobs. That was when I think the period of America was at its greatest because it was producing a lot more than it was importing. It was exporting or it was producing its own products. Yeah. And that has changed because, again, the ultimate goal in any profitable corporation is to try to provide those profits to their shareholders. Now, company owned or employee owned, maybe a different story. You see that around here. I mean, we hear about these folks that retire from a glass plant that has some type of ownership, employee owned. I mean, shit, that I don't know that happens anymore. But man, wouldn't that be great again? Wouldn't that be great again?
That's the hope that's being played off us, right?
So and that's where I think when I look at these things, these towns that got devastated because these plants removed themselves from there, it hurts. It hurts the local economy, and I think these folks are the ones that feel disenfranchised. So to your point, they hold on to this hope that we're going to make America back the way. That means that you have to bring back coal, car manufacturers back in there. But it's going to cost you and I, the reverse effect that it's going to cost you and I a lot more, because now you're having to pay wages that you probably haven't paid for a long time, that you're paying in a different country, astronomical.
Yeah.
And that car is just going to go up even higher for already depressed wages that you have today.
I'll say as my closing statement, my argument to that, to bring back to the local, I think that's when you say it's a broken system, when you say how many people who work in Madera don't live in Madera. And how many people who live in Madera go work in Fresno, instead of saying even just to shrink into our micro economy and say Madera should be able to fill the jobs of Madera, from the little to the greatest job, but we don't. And because we don't, now we have to pull from the outside. So just in our micro scale, you have the United States versus China right there.
So
because if those people lived in Madera, made their money in Madera, bought their house, all that, you talk about like how do you rejuvenate Madera? It's right there. But what do? They live in Clovis, they live in Fresno, they make their money, they pull all their money out, they put all their money into their home, and they buy all their stuff in Fresno, and it just sucks the money out of Madera.
So what do you think? Would you support me if I said let's build a wall around Madera?
A tariff for those who worked outside of Madera.
But I think his point would be to keep people in, right? Not necessarily
Correct.
keep people
I
out.
mean, and look, here's the power of geofencing, the power of data, right? If you really wanted to know, you can easily find out where the money's leaking. Where do people live? And it's there. It's in your fingertips. The data's there. It's just it's a privacy deal, right? I mean, imagine having all this data for city council people and saying, hey, here's where the majority of people are exiting that live here. They're buying in these particular areas because based on their phones or their you're able to see where they cross, where they're at, and where they're spending money. We have that data. It's just not available to us to make a decision and say,
I can tell you who has that data. In-N-Out, who just put their restaurant here, probably has that data.
They probably
know
do. They probably do. I just don't know, to what extent how we can use it in government, right? But I mean, I would say, if like to your point, right? We should keep people that work here within but they have a desire. That's the American dream, is that, hey, I have the right to live wherever I want, and you can't impose. Government can't impose you to say
no. But it's a
you
broken
have to
system.
live
If
here.
when you ask them and you say, well, why do you live in Clovis? Because I like X, Y, and Z.
Correct.
And then you say, okay, that's what Madera needs to focus on, so that we want you here. Because I can tell you that it's not because their house is cheaper. It's not because their cost of living is cheaper. It's not because their tax rate is lower. Because all those things are they're paying higher taxes, they're paying higher on their houses, they're paying everything.
Affluent people want to live with similar valued affluent people.
Yeah.
Let me just put it that way, because you see it a lot. The flight of money leaves Madera when demographics change. Nobody wants to talk about that, but it's the truth. You see it in every single city. Urban cities have certain areas that you would consider disadvantaged. At one point, they were flourishing when America was great. And then all of a sudden, you start seeing this suburban arena get into play, and they said, well, I want to move over here now because they have better schools and they have values similar to mine, whether it's religion, whether it's money, whatever the case may be. You start seeing that. So what happens? You vacate these areas. And those areas are the ones that you talk about most of the time. Well, why can't we make downtown great again? Let's make it great again. But how are you going to make it great again when you left money, you took money, and now you placed it, you concentrated it somewhere else. You took industry from there and you put it somewhere else. It's a flourishing community down there. You have people that are making things happen, that are paying taxes. It's just not to what you're used to seeing. It's not the America that you grew up with. It's not that throwing the paper, riding the bike, all that nostalgic type of feeling that you have. It's a different type of America. And people have a hard time with that sometimes.
We can change it. We can make it to horse riding only down Yosemite there on downtown.
Yeah, we may have to do that.
And a lot of good points. And I like this last this last piece of this segment because not my closing. I guess Brookie gave his closing.
I'm done.
That was a long closing. I just I like how you brought up the stuff like in Chicago or Michigan and. things were a lot more tangible. I think that's what we got to remember as the minority starts becoming almost the majority, right? And that's kind of where you start hearing, when was America ever great, right? Mm-hmm. Because my grandpa suffered, it took him forever to get his citizenship, and he was shunned and deported, and all this kind of stuff, right? They have those experiences, but I guess the white America who was here, who were citizens, and by the way, that whether you're Italian or Irish, you had your era of being at the bottom essentially and having to work through citizenship and all those challenges. But by the 50s, 60s, that was their reality, manufacturing jobs, and we're not too far away from the 50s, 60s. If you're a kid right now, you think, man, that was a long time ago, mm-hmm. but we're quick conversations, and we know somebody who lived it. Right? You can make a phone call who's somebody who could tell you how great things were when they were a kid and how awesome it was. It looked like, just like the TV shows. And so we're not far disconnected. And we have to realize when we're hearing these things, talking about America being great again, that's what we're referring to is the reality of a U.S. citizen at that time. And so now, as our generation, second, third generation Latinos are here in the country, now we have to realize, okay, this is what they're talking about, right? This is how disconnected we are since that time, right? And then lastly, as we're talking about communities and what makes people, what are those anchors that make people like business owners who live in Clovis, who do business in Madera, well, how do we get them to move here as well, right? Well, we also have to realize that these business owners or individuals are opportunists, and they found a market that they can serve, and it's not necessarily that their clients aren't necessarily them, right? It's great. All my clients are in Madera and I make a killing off of them, but I don't want to live amongst them, right? And because those individuals are, my product that I'm selling, I'm not selling this high expensive product. I'm selling the low product that they demand, right? And then when we talk about, government services or local government service, how do we make the city better? Oh, we need to provide amenities. We have a lot of minorities, and we got to keep giving and creating, these opportunities to support and help them. That's not going to create opportunities for, again, those business owners to say, oh, I need that, so I'm going to go over there and take advantage of it. That it doesn't really help them. They from afar, they're going to say, yeah, keep doing that because my clients live there and I need them to, have a few extra dollars in their pocket to buy my product, right? So it's how do you attract that caliber of people? And to Rohi's point, taxes, right? It's not cost. It's not lowering the cost. Because they're paying more where they live. Mm-hmm. It's the amenities that they're receiving, right? And so it's like if you build it, they will come. And I think you've kind of, that was your point with the downtown revitalization, right? You build it, they'll come. You have this grant money, you have these opportunities, but are we catering to that demographic of people, which is, I would just call it the top 1% in the valley, who are creating these jobs, creating these local, distributions or retailers that will, again, create jobs and opportunities for the other locals.
And just, I'll finish with this as well. So to that same point is that as you start seeing a city grow, a lot more dense urbanization, core services have to be downtown. That's why you see a government center, city hall, you see social services, public health. So all these things that people just say, well, I don't need that. But the good thing is that I have a car and there's roads that take me out to these suburbs that I can go to. They're within distance where I don't have to be around that, right?
Yeah.
I want to create a buffer zone. Well, that buffer zone, it's a stretch of road, stretch of infrastructure, and essentially after 25 years, 30 years, that infrastructure starts, it's deferred maintenance. It starts dilapidating just like anything else. It's got a shelf life, and it depreciates. And essentially, are we collecting enough money to be able to take care of that? So when these neighborhoods that were created back in the days are starting to come into question because now you're starting to see leaks or you're starting to see these sinkholes and what have you, then you start seeing, oh, wow. I mean, are we trying to keep, where is our priority, right? Are the amenities our priority right now? Or are we just trying to make sure that we put Band-Aids on everything? Because we don't have enough money to be able to keep us to where we want to be. Now, it's better to start from a blank canvas and draw and plan your way a city that potentially can last you over 100 years. That's what the downtown was made. The downtown was made to last you a long time because it has versatility. You can diversify different things. You can become mixed use. You can become residents. Whatever you can build up, but it's all there. But again, with the creation of the vehicle and roads, we now have spread that out and we sprawled outside of the urban core center. So to your point, we can't just come back and say, I would like it to be nice. You wouldn't come back if it was nice anyways. You're used to where you're at today. So that's not going to happen. I'll just finish with this. Flowers blossom and then they decay. And that's no different between us as well. And the economies are no different. They're not immune to the environment and to what happens. So that essentially comes to an end. And I'm not saying that we're in a decline, but we had our time. I think it reached its peak. And the illusion that we're going to be just as great as we were at one time, I mean, maybe for some people, but it ain't going to be for the majority of the people that felt, at least a good concentration of people that felt like they were at their peak. I'll end with that.
And that's the weekly jargon, folks. If you have any input on that, we'd like to hear it. Drop a comment, shoot us a text message, give us a call, yell at us, do what you want. But that's it, fellas.
That's it.
We circled around the globe with that one, and